This is Jeopardy!
Footnotes.
African American history.
African American history 200.
The National Museum of African American History and Culture opened in 2016 as part of this museum complex. Jesse.
What is the Smithsonian?
Yes.
The National Museum of African American History and Culture is a Smithsonian Institution museum located on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It was established in December 2003 and opened its permanent home in September 2016 with a ceremony led by President Barack Obama. The museum is nearly 400,000 square foot, wrapped in bronze and inspired by the three-tiered crown used in West African art. The museum shines brightly near the center of the National Mall. 5 stories down begins the journey of the African American experience. The slave cabins and shackles are reminders of America's regretful past. A stool from a Greensboro, North Carolina lunch counter represents the sit-ins of the 1960s, which were coordinated to bring an end to segregation. There is joy to be found as well in exhibits of trailblazers like Jackie Robinson and Chuck Berry's Cherry Red Cadillac. Around 400,000 artifacts have been collected, and only 10% of it is currently on display. After President Bush signed legislation to create the museum in 2003, Congress dedicated $270 million, which was only half of what it would cost to build. Over $300 million came through fundraising efforts from corporate partners, organizations, churches, and celebrities. The newest Smithsonian Museum is not a time capsule. It is a place where you will be encouraged to explore current events and happenings, including the current Black Lives Matter movement.
African American history 400.
These 2 Atlanta colleges were both founded soon after the Civil War, and Spelhouse marriages between alums are not rare. Jesse.
What are Morehouse and Spelman?
Correct.
Morehouse College is a private historically black men's college in Atlanta, Georgia. Morehouse College is the undergraduate alma mater of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Spelman College is a private liberal arts women college in Atlanta. Founded in 1881 as the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary, Spelman received its collegiate charter in 1924, making it the oldest private historically black liberal arts college for women. President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his first speech to black Americans standing on the steps of Ware Hall.
African American history 600.
In 1960, at a segregated lunch counter in North Carolina, 4 African American students staged one of these immobile protests. Megan.
What is a sit-in?
You got it.
On the 1st of February 1960, the Greensboro sit-ins began when 4 black students sat at the whites-only lunch counter in Woolworth's department store. The sit-ins were aimed to draw attention to the numerous injustices of the Jim Crow laws. After buying some items from Woolworth's department store, the students then took seats at the segregated lunch counter. In line with Woolworth's company policy, the staff refused to serve the men and then called the police after the Greensboro 4, as they would later be known, refused to leave. Because the protesters had not used force or provocation, the police were unable to intervene. The protest continued the next day as more students began to join, and thanks to local and national media coverage, the sit-in movement spread throughout the country at other segregated lunch counters. The protest went on to spur the desegregation of hundreds of public spaces around the country and advanced the civil rights movement of the 1960s.
African American history 800.
Now 115 years old, the Chicago Defender isn't a Bears safety, but one of the oldest of these for African Americans. Megan.
What is a newspaper?
You got it.
The Chicago Defender is a Chicago-based African American newspaper. It was founded in 1905 by Robert S. Abbott and was once considered the most important newspaper of its kind. The Defender opened the eyes of black Americans to new prospects and possibilities for a better life. The paper was a voice for the voiceless and promoted black economic growth, wellness, and prosperity. The newspaper helped connect people in the South with employers in the North and was a catalyst for what became known as the Great Migration. As men were leaving to fight in World War I, Northern industrial businesses began to seek Southern black workers to fill the demand. During the Great Migration, the black population in Chicago grew from 2% to around 33%. This surge in black families seeking a better opportunity is at least partly in thanks to the Chicago Defender.
African American History 1000.
M is for Methodist in this U.S. church that in 1820 launched a mission into West Africa. Jesse?
What is the AME Church?
That's it, African Methodist Episcopal.
The African Methodist Episcopal Church, or the AME, grew out of the Free African Society, which Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, and other free blacks established in Philadelphia in 1787. They left St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church because of discrimination. Allen had been a slave in Delaware, and to keep white Methodists from interfering with his church, he sued in 1807 and 1815 and won the right of his congregation to exist as an independent institution. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, the church grew to membership of more than 400,000.
So long, everybody. Until next time.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the Jeopardy footnotes. If you would, like and subscribe and comment with what categories you'd like to see next.